Which is the best watercolor paper for beginners? Have you ever wondered about that? I have, and what I did was I painted the same picture on 6 different kinds of paper. And let's begin with the first one. So, what do you think this is? So this paper, most artists tell you don't paint on this. So this is multimedia paper that is suitable for watercolor painting, and it's called Canson XL. So what do you think? I mean, I think it's not too bad, don't you? I mean, I don't think it's so bad. Maybe the problem is with me. Okay, I've been painting for 20 years, so maybe that makes a difference, but it still means that you can paint a good picture on this paper, right? So let's compare this anyway, to be fair, with one of the best papers out there, and one that I like too, Saunders and Waterford. So I do recommend this paper. I do think it is good, but let's have a look. Okay, sadly this is smaller size. I think if you look at the sky on the Saunders paper, it does look a little better, but you can start to see now the kind of difference you're getting. It's fairly subtle. So if you're a complete beginner, do I think you should be painting on this really good paper or on this multimedia paper? And the answer is both. So why is that? Simply put, so that you can skip this video then and you've got your answer. You're going to save a hell of a lot of money. That is an important reason for many people. But secondly, when you paint in watercolor, watercolor is an expressive medium. It's not just simply expressive, but you don't get a second chance in a way. When you put that brush on the paper, you have to be bold and you have to know what you're doing. Now, when you're painting on cheap paper, that's not so bad. And I've learned to master things like painting skies by just doing a lot of them on this kind of cheap multimedia paper, because I wasn't worried about wasting money. And even after 20 years, I still shrink when I paint on paper that costs $1 for one sheet. Of course, do paint on the back as well, but still I just find it hard to be as expressive as I can be on this multimedia paper as I can be on this good paper. And that's just my truth. Maybe you're different, and I hope so, because this good paper will make your work shine more. And there are things you can do on this paper, like wipe out with a tissue and just a lot of other things that make it good to use. And you do need eventually to get used to using this paper, this good quality watercolor paper. So don't just buy the cheap multimedia paper, which is half the price, maybe even cheaper. Do buy this as well, and basically do all your practice compositions, or your sketches, or your ideas on this paper. Yeah. And even do your finished painting on this paper. You know, have a go at the final painting and then have a go on this paper. And I'm sure you'll find out that you'll do better paintings on this paper, ones that really, yeah, I want to say really work, really kick, than ones on this paper. Sadly, that's been my experience, but you could be different. Okay, so let's look at some of the other papers. So that's basically the message in this video. And if I want to speed it up a bit as well, I could also say buy spiral bound pads and use 2 clips at the end, because I've used Saunders pads and they just buckle on me. And when because it's a pad with 12 sheets of paper on it, if the top one buckles, which has happened to me again and again, then all of them buckle. It just goes all the way through the different sheets. And so I just found that by using a spiral bound pad, when the paper starts to expand, because it's loose, it doesn't affect the sheet of paper underneath. And you can just unclip it, let the paper stretch out, and then re-clip it. And if you don't like the clip thing, because you get these weird kind of marks, you know, it's a bit like having a suntan, and you basically just put something here and here, and then you end up with these patches that look a bit strange. So you can even tape it down around the edges with masking tape, and then just put clips on the end on top of the masking tape, and then that way you'll get that lovely frame that people like. So I don't always do that because I think it's a bit wasteful, but it does look nice. Anyway, so that's basically the whole point of this video. But if you want to see the other results I've got, then I'll show you. So this is Lamp Light. It's made by a Japanese company, and I love this paper because for me it's just as good as Saunders, and it's cheaper. Not hugely cheaper, but it is cheaper, and it's lovely paper. So let's compare. It's a bit difficult. It's not a complete control because I'm not that good at painting that I can paint exactly the same picture every time. I'm really not as good as that. But so this is Saunders and this is Lamp Light. They're both good quality papers, acid free, all that. Even the Canson is acid free. I can sell that. It's quality. But these are the super quality, right? The cotton rag. And look, can you see any difference there? Okay, so I think one of the big takeaways from this is the papers I used, there's not a huge amount of difference. Now I don't want you to think that you can just use any watercolor paper, because there are ones out there which I will not name that I personally think are they're just like rubbish, and sometimes they sell for a bit of an expensive price. There's just one that I know of actually, or maybe two, that I think are really hard to paint on. It depends what kind of artist you are. So there are two kinds of paper. There's a cotton paper which absorbs the paint, and then there's the wood pulp papers which don't absorb the paint so quickly. And the cotton ones that absorb the paint, you can get real softness and subtlety with those papers. But the wood pulp ones, you don't often get those effects, but you do get other effects that, if you're creative, can work. But for a beginner, I probably wouldn't recommend too much. Anyway, moving on. Sorry, gas bagging. So this is a Japanese paper again called Watson. Now Watson is the most popular paper in Japan. To be honest, I'm not mad on it. Although the painting's okay, right? But to me, it's just about how it feels. I just don't like the feeling of this paper. Yeah, so I just don't like the feeling of it. I don't like the feeling of De La Rowney, or is it Langton? I just don't like the feeling of those papers, and I haven't used them a lot, so don't trust me on that. That's just personal feeling and experience. But I don't like the feeling of that. But when I look at the painting, I think, it's okay. Now this is Arches. Now Arches is, I want to say it's the most expensive, but I'm sure it's not. But for normal people, the ordinary watercolor artist, Arches is normally the king of papers. And this is like very rough paper, and this was my worst picture of the lot, in my opinion. Yeah, so if we have a look at the Saunders one, Lamplight one, I think this one's nicer. Look at that sky, it's pretty good, and the bridge is better. So I think that's nothing to do with the paper. It does have a weird smell. it smells like, you know, when you go into the countryside sometimes and you can smell something like, I don't want to say what it smells like, but that kind of yeah, you know, that planty seed smell. It's got that kind of smell. It's weird, and the texture at the top feels kind of funny. But if you look at the dry brush effect, it's fantastic dry brush effect, but that's because it's rough. The Saunders paper was not rough, it was semi-rough. And look at the blending here, that was good. But this bridge, goodness me, this is going in the bin. Well, actually, I'm going to paint on the back, and that could be a good painting. But anyway, there you go. So I've done some good paintings on Arches, and I do think it can be good, but because of the price, I wouldn't normally buy it. I really wouldn't. I did actually buy a huge roll once. It was huge, and I cut it all up and painted on it, and I've got some paintings on that, but I've forgotten where they are. But anyway, it can be, I think, as an I wouldn't recommend to beginners. After 2 or 3 years, when you start to produce pretty good paintings, there might be a good time to use Arches just as a fun thing. I don't know if that's fun when every time you fail you're losing $1, well, $2 a sheet. Something like that. And then finally, Strathmore. So I think Strathmore is a good paper. I put it in the same bracket or the same level as Saunders. It's probably not as popular, but I think it's probably just as good. It's good paper. So Saunders is good, Strathmore is good, but Lamplight I think is an interesting one, because for me, what Lamplight means is, although you can't buy that paper, there might be some brand out there that you can buy that's cheaper than Saunders that you're really going to like. I'm not sure if that's true, but there might be. So it is worth looking around and trying out some of them. And some of them, though, are really going to be horrible and you're going to hate them. But remember to use all the paper and practice on it, because at the end of the day, it's brush mileage. And I don't want to be kind of like, you know, like harsh, but with beginners, they're often talking all the time about materials. And I just get the feeling that they've got this kind of paradigm in their head that if they just buy this brush or this particular paper, they're going to make some amazing picture. And it's probably going to be better if you spend more time painting, because let's be honest, you're probably not painting every day. And if you're not painting every day, you're just not going to produce good paintings. It's going to take years and years, honestly. I mean, people don't tell you that, but it really is going to take an enormously long time to get good if you don't practice regularly. And you don't have to practice for a long time. And sorry for the speech, because this is all about paper, but I think that's an important part of talking about paper. It's more important to paint, and paint a lot, and not to think that you're going to end up with some paper that just leads to amazing paintings. That's a delusion. That's a delusion. And you know, the sooner you work that out, the better. And as you get better, you will just find out the better papers, or the ones that suit you, and the better brushes. Just don't buy a lot of materials, you know, just don't buy a lot. So I hope that's been helpful. Please have a go. So basically my recommendation is this: half of your paper should be multimedia, Canson XL. Some multimedia papers are not good, so be careful. Canson XL is better than most. It has to be suitable for watercolor paper. And remember, that's kind of like toilet paper. That's kind of what you, sorry for being so crude, but it's just kind of like paper you're just gonna not chuck down toilet, but just throw away. It's throwaway stuff, because what you're developing is brush mileage and your brush techniques and your confidence and boldness. What you really want to do is not be timid. You want to be bold, you want to paint, and you want to just enjoy it. I will do a video lesson in the near future, and please tell me if you want this as well, about how to really loosen up with watercolor painting, because I've been giving people the wrong material. I've been trying to teach them to paint shapes and buildings, but perhaps for real beginners at first, the best thing to do is just do things like play around with the colors, play around with brush strokes, and really get a feel. Because the truth is, a lot of those artists who do fantastic paintings, although they've painted an image, they intimately know, they're so aware of like how to blend colors and just playing with colors and washes and how to make a beautiful brush stroke. They don't even have to paint the shapes exactly. They just know how to make a shape that looks good. And so for a beginner, you really need to learn about that. Anyway, I'm being a windbag, so sorry about that. So to get back to the point, 50% multimedia paper, 50% a good paper like Saunders and Waterford, very great stuff. Strathmore, brilliant. Fabriano, I think, is a good paper. And there's that Hullermoor, no idea. It's a German paper, but that stuff is pretty good as well. So that should be it. And so I recommend you do all your messing around, playing around on the multimedia paper, and then you get the courage to jump onto or jump into using the good quality watercolor paper. So I hope that's helpful, and most important thing is practice and enjoy, and then you'll become superstar at watercolor painting with some time.